This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatale and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is show 363, the August 31st, 2018 edition. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you one last time for the season from the little house on the east side. The weather has turned, for the moment anyway, in Saratoga. It feels like fall out there right now. It's cloudy, it's cool, but you know what? I'll take it. I've had enough of the heat wave, and at least it doesn't seem like it's going to rain today. Looking forward to a final few days. We'll be talking in a few minutes about some of the stakes racing coming up at Saratoga this weekend, including a quartet of graded stakes. I'll also put in a quick plug for those of you out there who are going to be in the area tomorrow, Saturday, 11 a.m., second floor of the grandstand down near the new stretch area from which we did that show a few weeks ago. I'm going to be doing a little seminar with TV's Matt Bernier and Mike Spector, who I've had the pleasure of talking with a bit this summer, involved in EquestriaCon, which is going to be Breeders' Cup Week. Looking forward to that as well. But please come join us on Saturday, second floor of the grandstand, for the final seminar we're going to do this year at Saratoga. But first, let's bring in our co-host. You know him. You love him. He's the people's champ. He's calling in from the planet Texas. He is Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
PTF, what's the deal? I want you to know right now, just in case you try to get funny on me.
Uh-oh.
I screenshot my speed test. So any internet issues, you won't be able to throw me under the bus. I'm ready to defend myself.
Well, as we've seen before, speed test does not matter all the time on Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, sometimes even when the numbers are good, there are weird little dropouts. So I'll screenshot you back a picture of the special dongle I bought, an Ethernet cord, to hardwire in here, so you know it's not me. And while it's very often is from the DRF offices in New York, JK, I don't think that was the case last show. I think just like you were wrong about the Haskell Travers not being a problem, you should admit you were wrong about that, and you should admit that it was your Wi-Fi the last time that caused the problem.
I refuse. We'll agree to disagree.
Where will you be watching the racing from this weekend? Any special plans?
No, I'm gonna be home for the first time in a while. For it feels like during racing, I've watched racing from Saratoga, from Del Mar, from Saratoga, from an airplane, from Chicago, from Philadelphia, from Charlotte, from London, from everywhere. So I think this is gonna be the first time I'll watch a race from Saratoga and Del Mar from the comforts of my home.
And for the record, he doesn't mean London, Kentucky, folks. He's talking about London, England. We've had some congratulations come in from across the pond, JK, some folks who were very pleased with the job our panel did ahead of the Travers show last Friday. Hopefully we can measure up and get some good stuff going for the crew, the worldwide listening crew for the DRF Players Podcast this weekend. Where will most of your action be focused? I believe, is it Kentucky Downs this weekend as well as Del Mar and Saratoga?
Yeah, I think Kentucky Downs opens on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. Our buddy CJ Johnson does a great job, and Garrett Skiva sure does get excited about the jockey bet. Every time I look on Twitter, he's talking about the jockey bet. So yeah, they run Saturday with a $250,000 stake, a $750,000 stake, and a couple of $400,000 stakes to go along with it. So it should be fun to watch. Their big stake, Mr. Misunderstood shows up there. Famously related Camelot Kitten shows up there, Bound for Nowhere. So it should be fun to watch.
Excellent. I have not had a chance to look at those races yet. Have you looked at it at all beyond just perusing the entries?
No, I just kind of took a glance at the entries. Obviously Saratoga and Del Mar will be the focus of our conversation here. And then maybe next week we can give the real good push to our buddies at Kentucky Downs.
I misused peruse there, by the way, and that's a pet peeve of mine. It does not mean to look quickly. It means to look intensely, which obviously we haven't had time to do yet. But yes, lots of good stuff at Saratoga and Del Mar. We'll be talking about all of that over the course of the program. Before we get to that, I want to do a little bit of looking ahead because I find myself this weekend every year with a pit in my stomach. It's so amazing how quickly these 6.5, 7 weeks go. If only the time between after the Super Bowl, if only the 6.5 weeks after the Super Bowl through February into early March went as quickly, JK, as this time does during the summer meets. So a few years, there's things I look forward to doing. One is just generally speaking, getting back to some sort of sanity and routine and cleaning up the act, right? Because when you're up here, and I'm not complaining, but it's just an observation, when you're up here all summer, you have a lot of guests come through. And for them, it's like their little time in Saratoga. So they want to cram a lot of things in and get it in. And it's my personality, I guess, and I like being social and going out. So I get swept along for the ride. And I end up basically, in terms of eating and drinking, like I'm on vacation for 6.5 weeks. So to go back home and, parent will have the school routine, that will lead to a great routine for me. Obviously, I'm working very hard up here, but it's nice to be able to do it in a little bit more of a controlled way where your head doesn't feel quite as foggy in the morning, get back in a little bit more of what you might call a fitness and wellness regime. I do look forward to that in a funny way, but of course, it's so sad to say goodbye to the summer. Couple of things this year, though, I'm looking forward to. I do have another trip coming up in short order, and this is one I want everybody to be aware of out there, because if you're a contest player, we talk a lot about the Keeneland contest. I'm going to get to that in a minute in terms of fall targets. But this contest at Woodbine that's been going on the last few years really is a must get to. It is not a hard place to get to Toronto, really, from anywhere in the U.S. I'll even mention potential wise guy move of flying into the city airport, which you can get to via Porter Airlines, the Billy Bishop Airport. Much easier get through than Pearson, which is like the giant international airport. I've done door-to-door from Brooklyn to where I'm staying in Toronto in about 4 hours. It's an easy get. And this contest is terrific, reasonable buy-in, very nice prize pool. And I'm excited to hopefully meet and see some listeners and people we know. I know there's already a bunch of devoted contest players making to the plan to go up north for that day. Nick Tamaro, I believe, is going to be there. Scott Carson, heard a rumor Paul Sherman might be making the journey. But I just want to put a call out to all listeners, whether you reside in Canada or in the States. Make this contest a priority. I just think it's going to be a tremendous opportunity, and people are still talking about that buffet, the surf and turf from the buffet from last year. Anyway, there's my public service announcement. If you can't make it to this year's mile contest, think about next year already. It's one to plan ahead and put on the calendar. And then, of course, we have opportunities on DRF this weekend to qualify for some fall action, including the Keeneland tournament and as well as the Orleans Fall Classic, which might be of particular interest to certain players because it's a 3-day mythical event. So that's going to appeal to certain playing styles, and certainly Vegas lovers. The opportunity to get out there and experience that is something you should consider. Go to tournaments.drf.com to see all the available qualifying opportunities. JK, you had made some noise at some point about making a run at finishing in, I don't know what your goal was, the top 20 or so of the NHC Tour without playing an online contest, doing it all live. Is that still on your radar? And which events are you targeting, if so?
Yeah, I probably needed to have squeaked out a better performance somewhere along the way thus far. I guess Del Mar probably helped a little bit with the 5th place finish there. Obviously, an outright win there would have been a lot better. But And I also had originally planned on the Woodbine trip. I thought Long on Value was going to run the Woodbine Mile, so it was going to be a 2-for-1 situation with him not running there. I've kind of made a little bit of an audible in terms of that, but I still, it's going to have to. There's going to have to be another good performance out there for me to kind of obtain that goal. I'll play Keeneland. Obviously, I'll probably try to sneak into Santa Anita a couple more times. There is obviously going to be an opportunity in the Breeders' Cup, possibly the Del Mar Fall Contest, and then just kind of see if I can't find. I'm sure the Hawthorne Contest towards the usually the Friday after Thanksgiving. I'm going to try to swing up there, even if I just go for the day, pop in, make a bet, and leave. So there's still an opportunity or two, but we'll see what happens. I don't even know where I'm at now. I think maybe I'm in the top 75-ish. So. There's a chance, but I haven't been actively playing with the tour points calculator, to be honest, and trying to figure out where I'm at.
Makes sense, though. One more big run could put you in an interesting position. I wouldn't count you out. Wouldn't count you out just yet. It is too bad about Toronto. The other great thing about that I should have mentioned before is that Woodbine Mile weekend. It's always the Toronto Film Festival, so it's usually an easy sell to significant others because you have an opportunity to take advantage of that Toronto nightlife and get into some cool cutting edge movies before they're out everywhere. That's also always part of my plan when I head up north, which I'm looking forward to. And then, of course, Keeneland. I don't think I'm going to make the contest, but I am going to try to get there for the last few days of the meet. That will be they'll slide in right before EquestriaCon. Hopefully, between just enjoying the rhythm of getting back into life in Brooklyn and a couple of fun fall trips, you won't see me openly weeping at about 6:30 on Monday. But it's always a possibility. If you want to see a grown man cry, just roll down to the paddock bar around then. I'll try to keep it together, but it doesn't always work out so well. Some days I can't even face the last day and will actually zip out early. Haven't decided yet what's going to happen this year. How about you? Do you have any emotions about this time of year? I mean, as crazy as your travel schedule is, I imagine in some ways it's a relief when it's over.
It usually is, to be honest. There's times where things are going well and I need a break, and there's times where things are going poorly and I need a break. So this happens to be a poorly need a break. I just the opportunities are so plentiful when it comes to Del Mar and Saratoga that as a horse player, if you've dedicated your parts of your year to horseplay, when those opportunities come up at Saratoga and Del Mar, you feel inclined to engage. And so once it kind of slows down and you're back to the normal $20,000 pick six carryover on a Wednesday at Belmont, you don't feel as inclined to chase that situation. When there's the $300,000 one on Wednesday with full fields and horses that you know about, it's a little bit more. It's got a little bit more of a gravitational pull to it, and so there is a little bit of relief when it's over, and a nice little break before Belmont, Keeneland, and all that kind of get going again, and Churchill and Santa and then rolling right into the Breeders' Cup. So I'm okay with it.
All right, I like it. Let's get into that conversation that we had to postpone from last show because we were so chock-a-block recapping Travers Day stuff. Oh, and I also wanted to I wanted to go back to the late Abel Tasman race again. We got some really good feedback about that. But before we do that, let's go to the Twitter etiquette question we were talking about. Horse racing Twitter can be an amazing place, I think, for players to connect, to hear opinions from a lot of people out there who are genuinely interested in growing the sport and educating players. And you do see that from time to time, meaningful connections. You also see various kinds of kvetching when some players do it almost therapeutically, complaining about various things. Others, I think, sometimes take it to a level of unpleasantness that it starts to get a little funky. And I got the impression from talking to you last week, JK, that you had some advice for some of these folks out there who seem to be crossing that line, or maybe it was more about explaining where the line is between the negativity that you're just letting out of your horse playing body to keep yourself sane, and when that becomes something that maybe needs to be checked a little bit.
Right. I mean, I've had look at this, actually a very interesting number. I've had 5,555 tweets in my Twitter career. I would probably like to take back 50 of them.
I can think
a lot of them are the emotion laced, emotion laced or unfair, venom in someone's direction, or my frustration being taken out, in whatever it is, 170 characters or 40 characters or whatever it might be. I know it's changed to 2 something now, but I think in the world in general, there's just some rules that I try to follow. And I, like I said, I'm not perfect. But I ran into the situation a few times recently, and I just thought it makes a little bit of sense. I just think that there is and I've actually been giggled to about this before, but I really do believe it. I think there's a hierarchy when it comes to anything in life, whether it be, in your family or at work or in hobbies or whatever it is. And I just feel like certain people deserve a certain amount of respect, whether you agree with them or not. And, there's a comment last week directed towards, and look, there's no secrets about it. One of our good friends, Mike Maloney, and I just feel like even if you personally have some questions or some you want to question some things or inquire about some statements or whatever, I just feel like there's a better way to go about it for someone who's been an ambassador for the game for so long, and doing it publicly on Twitter with incomplete facts, to me, is just irresponsible. Now look, if you got some slappy on Twitter and you want to attack that person because they're popping off or something like that, or if Pete or I say something, you want to attack us, good God bless you, attack us, say something that we said was stupid. But to target one of the legends of what it is that we all love to do, and that's horseplay, someone who has, and obviously in your book, a lot of the situations were noted, who has done a lot more for horse players as an individual than too many individuals that I know. To like poke at that person, to me, is like, I find it to be misguided. And when I was in my short coaching career in Texas high school football, which is very, Texas high school football is very, I don't want to say it's cultish, but it's a tradition like no other. And one of the things I learned with a lot of these old coaches, where you kind of learn and know everyone, and it's a coaching trees, just like in the NFL, where those 5 guys used to work for those guys, and they all kind of branched out. One of the things I learned at a very young age is no matter how smart you are, no matter how many good things you're doing, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and use them accordingly. Mm-hmm. And even if you're in a meeting, and I learned this as a young coach, and you're right, you don't question the older guy in front of everybody. You can pull him aside afterwards, shoot him a message, talk to him privately, and then try to understand where he's coming from, get your point across, and then try to find a more appropriate way to share your opinion. But to pop off in a public forum towards someone who's forgotten more about horse racing advocacy than you'll ever do in your entire life, I think it's annoying.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And it's also a fine line between, we're not talking about an inquiry really about a position. We're talking about an ad hominem attack, and it's incredibly bad form. And I'm not in the business of trying to shame people on Twitter, but there are exceptions that I'll make, and that was certainly one of them. Now, generally speaking, I think that attitude makes sense. What do you try to get out of Twitter, JK, both as somebody who posts and somebody who reads through the timeline? What's the correct use of it?
Look, by nature, we're all know-it-alls. That's what drug us to this game. There's an ego part of it. We talked about it in developing the show. There's an ego to this thing. If there wasn't, then you wouldn't be drawn to a game that requires you to place your money on something that you believe versus another person. That's what's great about the parimutuel game. So to try to eliminate the fact that there's ego involved, or to say that I've never, I try not to be boastful, but to say that I've never been know-it-all-ish on Twitter, it's probably, I try not to be gross about it, but I'm sure it's happened from time to time. I prefer to use Twitter as an opportunity to if someone who didn't know anything about Twitter asks me, why do I use Twitter for horse racing? One is an opportunity to hear other people's perspective, to gather news and information in one central place by the list of people that I've chosen to follow, to have interesting conversation and debate. A small part of me likes to prove stupid people wrong, but I try not to get too caught up in that. It happens from time to time. And the other thing is to promote things that we're involved in, or things that I believe in, or things that I think are lifting up our sport, whether it be a retweet of someone's intelligent comments, and then the other part of it is just to kind of sometimes see funny stuff. Like I think yesterday I tweeted something I was very proud of, where I had made an observation that, man, the amount of hustling that goes on inside of a Starbucks with the pamphlets and the life-changing opportunities and Bluetooth earpieces is remarkable. Times to make a little joke here and there and poke fun at myself or others. So, but I don't feel, but I also, this is what it's not for me. The parimutuel betting window is where I get my opinion across, and where I get the joy of being right or the frustration of being wrong. I don't necessarily, I'm not usually one on there tweeting pics and stuff like that and selling anything. So I don't use it for that. I don't knock people for that, but that's not how I use it.
I would say that the mute button is your best friend with a lot of this stuff.
Well, we disagree about that though, right? We've talked about that before. And here's the difference is I always tell you, like, I want to see the snakes in the grass. I want to know where they're at and what they're saying and doing, so that I can see them coming. I don't want to not know what they're saying. Unfortunately, I'm not mature enough to always ignore what they say, but I would rather know it and see it than not see it at all.
They're so irrelevant, though, to me, that I have no interest in that. I believe that our friend Craig Bernick is right when he says, never argue with an idiot, don't try to smarten up a dummy. If somebody's going to come at you in an aggressive way, like, I just have no, I would rather just ignore. If somebody relevant is going to say something, I'm with you. But I think a large portion, maybe 90% of the stuff on there that's unpleasant is just beneath my dignity to even consider it for a second, frankly. And if that makes me sound like an egomaniac, sign me up.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say about Twitter and just about horse player advocacy and trying to get things accomplished in our game, I think a handful of guys who I think are really smart. I think there's a handful of guys who find the iron fist, zero tolerance. This is going to change. You're an idiot. And that's the final answer attitude. I wish they would understand that like everything else in the world, it requires some diplomacy. It requires some compromise. It requires some listening, some understanding someone else's perspective, maybe not agreeing with it, but understanding it, and some respect to get things accomplished. One of the things I've learned being on the the NTRA Players Committee and the Wager and Create the Breeders' Cup, you can't just go in there and start throwing a temper tantrum. I tell my son that all the time. Like, dude, whoa. Like, I'm not listening to you. You're acting like that. Calm down. Tell me the reasons why you want ice cream, and then we'll come up with a plan to see if you can get ice cream. But crying about it, no, that's not going to work. No one listens to that. And so the hateful, venom spewing comments on Twitter, whether you're saying smart things or not, they're not being listened to. You're just the crazy guy on Twitter. So don't misunderstand the patience and bigger picture that some of us try to see when trying to get things changed for the betterment of the horse player.
I have some sympathy for the point of view that somebody who's really, and I'm thinking of a particular person who might be listening, who's particularly like, I want to say vehement rather than venomous in a position, that having somebody pushing the conversation with a really strong point of view can sometimes move that window of what the conversation is out there in the world, what's known as the Overton window of a certain point of discussion. How having those really strong voices with strong, maybe unpopular opinions, I do have some respect for it, but I also think that there's a line there where if you descend into just being a bomb thrower, you're probably wasting your breath and turning more people against you. So it's a fine line, this Twitter etiquette situation. We obviously have subtle differences in how we see it, but I'll return to that idea from Craig Bernick, and I'll give it he doesn't give the full line on Twitter, but I think this is what he's getting at about arguing with an idiot. Never argue with an idiot. They pull you down to their level and beat you with experience. And then the other one, the variation on the theme that I like, is never wrestle with a pig. You'll both get dirty, but the pig will like it. And there's really some serious wisdom in that last statement. And that's one that I'll throw at you, JK, for consideration. Sometimes you're letting these people win even by talking to them.
Yeah.
Online and offline, JK.
I know. Well, I know. I think that part of it is, and maybe it's and I've experienced this in a lot of different situations in my life. This is like a therapy session. This is amazing. Some people are probably annoyed. I feel inclined to, and I think a lot of people don't do this, which is frustrating. I feel inclined to explain my position as thoroughly as possible, not to convince you that I'm right, but so that you can have a better understanding of why I'm coming from where I'm coming from. So that then we can move past whatever it was that we were disagreeing about from a point of like, oh, okay, now I get why you're doing that. And so I try to do that. I get carried away with it from time to time. But I think that this can also be kind of brought back into like our conversation last week when it comes to racing and betting personality, is that, it doesn't have to be so black and white. I know that as smart, opinionated men and women, we feel like it needs to be so black and white, where I'm either on this side or that side. And a lot of us don't like to operate in the gray because it for whatever reason, I think we think it shows a sign of uncertainty or weakness, when really we would all be better off if we operated in the gray area. And I think the same thing happens. Like, I don't have to single the Chad Brown horse in the turf. I can be a little bit more gray. It doesn't have to be so black and white. And at the end of the day, I'll probably be better off financially in terms of my wagering, return.
Funny you mentioned that, because I had a great conversation this week with pro player Sean Borman about the importance of being able to hold multiple contradictory thoughts in your head at the same time, and how I think in many ways that's the key to successful gambling, but also how it can make you sound real flaky, unfortunately, on a podcast. We're going to do a whole show about that idea at some point. It might wait until those quiet weeks after the Breeders' Cup at the end of the year. But I want to do some high-level wagering strategy stuff that builds on that very idea you're talking about. Before we move on, and I do want to touch on a late Abel Tasman before we get into these races one more time. But you reminded me when you were talking about explaining yourself, JK. I'll hit the listeners with one more aphorism during this hour of the DRF Players Podcast. Best fortune cookie fortune I ever got. Never explain yourself. Your friends don't need you to, and your enemies won't believe you anyway. All right, back to this race from the other weekend. I watched that replay 6 more times. I still have my same opinion, but I will say this, and I should have made this clear the first time we talked about it. I do think this one in particular, this inquiry in the stretch, is one that reasonable people can disagree about. And I do think that there is a little bit of a contrast between the Saturday non-DQ, and the Sunday DQ. This might not be a popular opinion. But there is a bit of a contrast in that as you pointed out, JK, I don't know if this part was during when the call got garbled, so I just want to underline the point, if it didn't come across in the first show, that Elate, if you watch the entire stretch run, not just the incident, Elate is kind of erratic coming in slowly throughout the stretch. And I don't think I made it sound like it was 100% Abel Tasman, like coming out into her, and that lean at the end was completely reactionary. Watching the replay a bunch more times, I don't think I can say that with anything like 100% confidence. For me, it's probably down to like 60-40 confidence. Look, I think there should have been a change. I think it was more aggressive from the inside. I think it was the difference in the race. But reasonable people can disagree, and I just wanted to make that very clear. And I did want to contrast the path that Elate took coming in throughout the course of the stretch with the straighter path that the horse on Sunday kept. And I think the moral of the story for me, and feel free to chime in on this when I'm done, JK, but the moral of the story is, as I looked at it 70,000 times, I was able to see the steward's logic. And I just wish we could promote more. I know they used to do it. I didn't hear it last weekend, but where they have Larry Colmus come on and explain what happened, and then maybe follow that up with something that's accessible on the website where we can see the whole logic, where we can compare the incidents as to why Saturday was different than Sunday. The more explanation we can get from the people making these decisions that are shifting, an awful lot of money, whatever it is, hundreds of thousands, from one pocket to another, the more transparency we can have over this process, the better everybody's going to feel about it, the more people will be confident about betting in the future. Your thoughts, my man?
For me, like we talked about, and maybe I was doing the dishes when we were talking about it last week, so I'll repeat it, or earlier this week. For me, it's Mackenzie Bolt-Doro, Abel Tasman, Elate, and I think the Dr. Edgar, I think, was the horse on Sunday. To me, the problem is solved if the same thing happened in all three of those. I wouldn't have a problem either way. If they changed all three of them, then here we go. That's how we're playing the game. We all understand what's happening. Let's do it. If they disqualified all three of them, okay, that's how we're playing the game. That's fine. Let's do it. It's the inconsistency to me that is the problem. It's the inconsistency that to me upsets the players, that makes it an issue. If they would just find a lane and stay in it and explain to us why we're in the lane and don't go to the other lane and keep switching back and forth, I don't think it would be a problem. It's the inconsistency to me that makes it an issue, that gets people up in arms about it, because like you said, Elate came over a path, Abel Tasman came over two. There was arguments on both sides, and that's fine. There just needs to be one simple direction.
Yeah, I think that you can argue that the Saturday and Sunday calls, there's a world in which I could argue, if I were in a debate team, that it wasn't inconsistent, that it had to do with the path that the bumped horse took, whether it was straight or whether it was coming in. But it's silly that we have to, before I even come to that conclusion, it's silly that I have to talk to 8 people and watch a replay 50 times. It would be nice if there was just a very clear messaging. You were talking, I think, literally about staying in the lane, but I'm talking more like figuratively what the lanes are that the stewards are expecting, and just educating the public about what's what, instead of leaving it in this very fuzzy / inconsistent place. Let's talk about some of the races from this weekend, JK. There's a lot going on. I looked at this late pick 4 at Saratoga. Let's hold that, actually, and let's start with some of the stakes racing from around the country. Did you look at Del Mar on Saturday? I think they have some good stuff out there.
I did. It's the race that is the definition of, you can't tell me that a 5-horse field with these fillies in it, and I'm talking about the Del Mar Debutante, the Grade 1 Del Mar Debutante, this 5-horse race isn't more competitive and a better wagering proposition than a 13, 14-horse inner turf maiden 40 where you've got no idea what's going to happen. And I think it's a fun handicapping puzzle, and it's interesting. A lot of things going on. Brill, the expensive OXO equine that one of those monsters that Hollendorfer has unveiled this summer. The other one being Instagram, and Mother, who was the other good Baffert who decided to stay home, while the more famous, at least famous in terms of family, with Chasing Yesterday, is going to show up in a stake at Saratoga, and then the one that's actually won a stake with a really big figure in Bellafina for Simon Callahan and Kaleem Shaw. So 3 horses that definitely are ones that are going to be heard from this weekend, and obviously probably the first Saturday in November, and I would imagine that one of these 3 will probably be heard from the first Saturday or first Friday in May as well. So definitely a fun race. I went back and forth between Brill and Bellafina. It's more to me that Brill missed the break and ran so well going 5 when the Medaglia d'Oro Malibu Moon cross that you're going to see in the breeding suggests that this one wants longer. And the $1 million purchase price, they don't pay $1 million for sprinters. So you'd think that the extra 2/8, the extra quarter is going to be exactly what this one wants. And so I think Brill is going to be tough in here. Bellafina should go off favored based on the stake win, but Brill's pretty popular and Drayden's doing well, and it's Hollendorfer. So it's going to be interesting what they do there. But Mother's going to take money too for Baffert.
Yeah, the morning line has Brill 8-5, Bellafina 9-5, and Mother 2-1. Looking at the pace projector, it's a little bit cross-currenty there too, in a way, because you have Bellafina loose on the lead, but the pace projector is also coded as fast, suggesting, will she be able to see out that extra furlong? She started with the second place at 5 at Los Al. Obviously smashed them up, going 6 earlier in the meet at Del Mar. What's your gut on her ability? I mean, based on breeding, you'd think it would be okay. But, I mean, at the end of the day, were you confidently siding with Brill, or were you thinking, I know you love those speed fillies. I was thinking you might be drawn to Bellafina just for tomorrow's race anyway, based on the potential pace scenario.
I thought about it. Like I said, I went between both of them. It's one of those situations you had mentioned earlier when you said you were talking to Sean Borman about the wishy-washiness of an opinion isn't great for a podcast. I don't necessarily need both of them equally. I'm not going to be ice cold to Brill. I do think that, in my opinion, at this point, Brill is probably the most likely winner. I'd like to see the workout reports since, see how they're coming out of it. I'm sure that's going to be available. If it's not already up, it should be available soon for the DRF Clocker report out of Del Mar. Brill was working well into her last. Let's see how she's doing. Bellafina was working at Del Mar and Mother as well. So we should have works and a score for all of those. But I just think that Brill, the thing that got me to go is the improvement I think you're going to see from Brill going from 5 to 7. That extra quarter of a mile, as well as the breeding and the suggestion that she's going to want to run, she's going to want to run longer, and the fact that she missed the break last time and still won so impressively.
It all makes sense. Would you use Mother for a penny in your picks, or would you try to beat her?
No, I think that when you're in a situation like this and there's 3 horses like this that stand out, you can't use the one that is the third most likely winner of the 3 short priced horses. I think that it's, to me, that's the equivalent of using in a 10-horse field using 7. You gotta crack some eggs, and I don't think you can use all 3 of them. And Mother's the one that I'm going to leave out. I don't know what to make of it. I guess the time for first of all, her time form US figure is the slowest of the 3 of them. But also, the fact that Talamo shows up for Baffert, that's not exactly a combination that typically happens. I mean, there's some explanation for that, right? I mean, Drayden's going to ride Brill, and Mike Smith is out of town on Chasing Yesterday. But I think that's one I would probably fade.
All right, makes sense. Let's move on to the other graded stakes race at Del Mar on Saturday. That's the maybe old friend Cambodia shows up in here. Drayden Van Dyke in the irons for Tom Proctor. Where did you end up, JK?
Yeah, Cambodia, she loves it here. She's I think she's got four wins, I think, at Del Mar. She runs really well here. She's going to get that extra 16th of a mile. And we talked about this the other day. These turf races, Cambodia could get a bad trip and Storm the Hill wins. I can tell you why 4 other horses can win, but in my opinion, the most likely winner is going to be Cambodia. She's done so well on the West Coast, but I think if her mail gets delivered to the East Coast, so she's technically an East Coast horse. But I think she's probably one of the most likely winners. The only other one that's a little bit interesting is this Fahan Murrah, who ran. We saw her on Belmont weekend, where she opened up by 6 and early in that race, and was run down by the talented 4-star crook Sister Charlie and Daddy's Little Darling. The company she was keeping with those 3 is nothing to blink your eyes at. I think she could be forward. I don't know if she'll be dead loose in Southern California, but Edwin Maldonado will put her out there on the front end, and they'll have to come catch her. So she's definitely one I would consider as well. But it just feels like if it's a fairly run race and there's no issues with trip, Cambodia is the most likely winner.
Now I'm going to throw this out there. Hopefully it's not going to put anybody away, but Farhan Murrah was a vet scratch August 15th at Del Mar. I haven't read the preview article of the race yet to hear what was happening there, if there's a narrative explanation. But that does make me nervous with a front runner on the turf, with a lot of talented fillies to potentially run her down anyway. I don't like to see that vet scratch. I know that statistically, if you look at vet scratches in aggregate, they're not really there's not a lot of signal in that information. But my gut is that those in aggregate numbers on vet scratches might be gummed up by horses in claiming races who they found out were going to get claimed and somebody pulled some strings. Not that kind of funny business happens all the time, but I think we'd be naive to say it never happens. When it happens at the stakes level, I don't like it. I don't like it at the stakes level. I don't like it off long layoffs. That's where, for me, maybe it has a little bit more signal. Anyway, maybe do a little bit of due diligence on Farhan Murrah in the pages of Daily Racing Form before jumping headlong there.
If you're a formulator guy or gal or a DRF Classic PPs, you might be kind of asking where that vet scratch information is. And I'll give you 2 kind of clues that are great about Timeform US is that one of my favorite things, I think some people think like I really did the addition and subtraction to figure out how many days in between a start when I'm doing a video or something. I'll say 43, hasn't run in 43 days. My math is not that good. It's written right there. So it's really nice where it'll say exactly how many days in between their last start. And it also has a line that there was a vet scratch. So it said vet scratch August 15th for Fahan Murrah. Her last start was 43 days ago. Things of that nature. So if it's another reason, just for there's a lot of reasons, but that's another reason to take a look at Timeform US.
While we're out west, did you mention before there was something you wanted to talk about on Sunday out there at the Seaside Oval?
There was a race on Sunday. Oh, it was the Del Mar Derby, which is always a fun race. It's it's one of the last 3-year-old races on the turf, kind of going long for some of these horses. Yeah, and so it's always caught my attention. Arwalk is a horse that I tried to bet in the La Jolla. I thought the horse ran well at Churchill Downs, was kind of down on the inside where you didn't want to be. And so I've bet Arwalk the last 3 times. Gary didn't do his best work on June 16th. July 18th at Del Mar wasn't better, but he kind of showed back up in the La Jolla on August 5th and ran well, ran second to River Boyne, who I would imagine is going to be a heavy favorite in this spot. He makes the most sense based off of his some of his runs. But I'm going to give Arwalk another shot with Dennis O'Neill. Bejarano for the second time. Got to know him a little bit more that time. Obviously will provide a little bit more value than River Boyne. But, I was looking to see if Chad was going to send something out here to try to pick up a stake win. But the only real East Coast turf horse that I see is Ride a Comet for Mark Casse. And he's one that you would definitely want to take a look at, too. Ran well in the Hall of Fame on yielding surface, and maybe the trip out west is suggesting that he's looking for something a little bit more firm. So I would keep an eye out on him as well. but he's probably going to be over bet, but definitely one that you'd want to keep an eye on.
I like Arawak as well. While we're talking so much time for him, U.S., let's keep the momentum going. Closing into a pace line of a race that seemed, it wasn't coded one way or another, but seemed to make a move into a quick part of that race, if I'm reading that right, and that can sometimes be interesting as an alternative, especially if, as you guess, River Boyne goes off as a heavy favorite. Definitely some things to like there for O'Neill and Bejarano. Let's move it back east, JK, and we'll start with Saratoga on Saturday. We have this quartet of graded stakes races to finish out the card, and it all starts with the Grade 3 Saranac. You have a selection in here?
I tried to beat Raging Bull last time, and I think we were sitting at I don't know if do you remember where we were when Raging Bull won?
Of course I do. We were at Peabody's. I was sweating the Cubs game and more or less taking the day off. I thought, didn't I in the end convince you to use Raging Bull? That was my memory.
You did. I was trying to beat him then. I'm going to try to beat him here again as well. But look, this is a very cute selection. There's a lot of horses in here that can win the race. But I'm against Murad, as I always will be. Because that's what I signed a contract to do that. He's a Unbridled Empire, obviously a half to Arkelo, and any other horse that dons the green and yellow and beats me. I don't know if this one won't have on the green and yellow, so there's a little bit of an advantage there. But I'm being sucked in a little bit to the Free Drop Billy thing. I think Free Drop Billy, he ran on the dirt like a turf horse. Like a lot of his races kind of felt like that. He's got that closer's feel, that drop back, make one run move. And, we've talked about one of the reasons we thought he would stretch out so well is because he's a half to Hawkbill, who is a graded stakes winner on the turf in his own right, long on the turf. So there's got to be some turf deep down in that pedigree. Union Rags can get a turf horse. And so I'm going to give him a little bit of a shot with showing up in here, first-time turf. He hasn't worked on the turf. Dale even mentioned on Steve Vick's show that he was hopeful to try to get him on the grass for a work, but it rained, and so they couldn't. So they're just going to find out what happens when he steps on there. I guess a minute or two before post. So I think Free Drop Billy's interesting with the breeding.
It is a great breeding angle. I had that circle to mention, half to a multiple Group 1 winner, over 4.7 million from Hawksbill. For me, Free Drop Billy's just all about what price he is on the board, and I worry that being a quote unquote famous horse, you're going to get lower than the 6-1 of the morning line. I think there's a world in which you could get lower than 4-1. And if you were to go that low, I'd be a play against for me. 6-1, I agree with you, JK, would be worth a shot on the pedigree play. I have never bet Murad before, but I thought Murad looked interesting here, just the way the race shook out. That was an odd run in a race that flowed to the full advantage of Raging Bull. And I thought running a little bit more efficiently, Murad might just have a chance, and that should be north of 7-2, that type of price. I was actually interested to get on the bandwagon. Now, take your prejudiced against Murad hat off. Do you have a handicapping reason against him, or is this one of those where you really is about the contract you signed?
It's not really the contract I signed. It's more or less the fact that I feel like since the Palm Beach Downs, the Palm Beach Stakes at Gulfstream and subsequently the race at the American Turf at Churchill, he's just always a shorter price than I feel his credentials and ability suggest he should be. And with the Todd factor, he's always going to be a little bit probably overbet. And I just want to try to beat him when I have the chance. I think there's just some value there because I don't think he's just like that quality of an animal that you have to fear him in every spot he shows up in.
I will say this. It's logical to me that you're against both Raging Bull and Murad. Were you to like Raging Bull and not Murad, I would have questioned you about that because I do think Murad ran the better of the two given the race flow last time. Just for academic purposes, who do you think ran better of those two in the Hall of Fame?
Probably Murad. He was a tad bit closer to a quick pace, but they were both pretty far back. I mean, Murad started off about 8 back, and Raging Bull was about 12 back at one point. So I mean, they both got what you would call a little bit of a setup on yielding ground, kind of circling the field. But I would probably say Murad ran the better race.
Yeah, for me, it's when he made the move. It's one of those things where you see when races kind of collapse. I talk about this all the time, the old move into the hot pace, the horse that makes the move that sort of breaks the race as opposed to the horse. You want to be the horse who makes the last move when it flows like that. That was Raging Bull. My friend Christina Helmer is going to be upset with me that I'm picking against her favorite horse, but it's Murad for me.
What did you say?
What's that?
Who did you say?
You don't remember that story about Christina Helmer, who I met on the day before the Belmont, and she bet her picked and bet her first winner, and then I learned her name and told her we couldn't be friends, and she looked at me like I was crazy, and I never bothered to explain this.
No, I remember. I was gonna have a follow-up joke, but I panicked and then fell into that mode, so I just skipped it.
I stepped on you maybe a little bit too. Let's talk about the spin-away, JK. It's a grade 1. Will you be busting out the silver wig?
Hey, what I mean, do Mike Smith and Bob Baffert ever lose races at Saratoga? I mean, why wouldn't you bring out the silver wig?
7 of 8. I looked it up. 7 of 8 in the last 5 years for that particular tandem. I'm going to do that terrible thing where I ask you a question I don't know the answer to. Who is the loser?
Do you know?
I have it now.
Is it recent?
Yes, you know it. It was in.
I want to say it was in. I want to say it was in a 7 furlong dirt race.
It was a race that you made. I'm just going to clue it to you this way. It was a race you made a lot of money on. It was of the last several Travers days. It was the key horse of all key horses who put this one.
Yeah, I just don't remember who Practical Joke bet that day. I guess it must have been. Oh, American Anthem.
You got it. The lone place. Funny enough, this cracked me up. You look at in the last 5 years at Saratoga, Baffert with jockeys who aren't Mike Smith, it's either 1 for 11 or 0 for 10.
You don't know who they are.
I can look right now.
Because here's my thought. Someone mentioned that to me, and my thought is that the edge that Baffert has is he has these forward just Marines that he brings over here that just run everything else off their feet. They're fast, they're fit, they're all of those things. And those horses really, really, really fit Mike Smith. And so I wonder if the ones that Mike didn't come over on, they weren't kind of his killers. I want to know which ones were the ones that failed that weren't Mike. I'm just curious.
Well, there was this horse who's related to Chasing Yesterday in the spinaway, JK, who didn't.
That was Victor's fault. No, I'm just kidding. That was Frosted's. That was Frosted's fault. I know it was Frosted's fault. Frosted's fault.
Yeah, that's
get well, Victor. No, that
it was the Haskell's fault. Get well, Victor. We'll just continue to argue about that for the rest of eternity on the podcast. I kind of like it. Let's get back to this race, JK. How strong of an opinion is Chasing Yesterday? How short should this filly be? Do you have an alternative to suggest?
I mean, she's obviously going to be too short to really, if you're a win wager value person, she's probably too short in that situation. You can obviously get cute and single and stuff. I think she's a real runner. I mean, I think a lot of times these situations, this, breed royal to breed royal, and it kind of always leaves us wanting a little bit, not counting Unique Bella and horses like that. But I think she's really good. She ran well on debut. She was in the right place that day. I don't necessarily say she was helped by the track, but, Del Mar as a whole has not been ideal down inside. She was never down there. She ran well. She was bet. The horse, the race is I thought she was good, and she shows up here. She hits Mike. She's drawn well. Yeah, I obviously want to see the workout report and how she goes. Like I said, Baffert doesn't put them on the plane if they're not going to run well. He's one of those guys. He's like Chad. He doesn't have to. He just tells his owners we're not going, and what are they going to do? Argue with him and take him from his barn? He just won 3 grade ones there, and then the last, what are they going to? How are they going to argue with him?
What if I told you could get 2 to 1 on Chasing Yesterday? How big of a bet would that be for you?
No, I mean, it'd be a sizable one if I could lock that in now. Here's my thing. I'd rather wait to see how the track's playing, make sure it's not inside, and then just try to cleverly wager to get 2-1 on her with hooking her up with, horses coming in or coming out of that race. So I don't need it now. If I can get it then, it's very attractive.
Hold,
but I don't.
In other words, you would hold at that price.
I would
Let's
hold.
Move on. We're running out of time. I should ask producer AJ. Producer AJ, if you're listening, text me. Can we run 5 over? Because I realized I've been a little derelict in my hosting duties, and we should have left more than 5 minutes to talk about these last 2 races plus whatever closing thoughts we have. Let's get to this crazy Woodward. It's a big field.
Real quick, I liked Reflect too. You got his West Coast horse ran well at Del Mar, gets Manny Franco for Keith DeSormo. The horse ran huge pace figures in her last start, going 6. Now she shows up here. I think she's very live at 10-1 and could be the forgotten West Coaster.
Interesting. So you would use 2. It is not a single A situation for you, or is it an A and Reflect as a single B? Describe how you're thinking of that.
This is going to be weird, but some people will know what I'm talking about. Chasing Yesterday would be like a double A, and the Reflect would be a single A. Kind of. I want to treat them both as A's.
About that.
Yeah, just kind of press her up a little bit more with Chasing
An
Yesterday.
A that you press, the old A+ angle. We've talked about that on the show, and we'll get to more of that type of stuff when we get to those betting shows that'll be happening at some point. All right, now the Woodward, our old buddy Yoshida, trying out the dirt. I know Sean Tugel himself, director of Bloodstock from Windstar, will be in the house to watch this one. How do you assess Yoshida's chances of making this surface adjustment, and what's your thought on this year's Woodward?
I think it's interesting because they've always hinted at doing this. They hinted at doing it last year in the Jim Dandy. They did Good Samaritan as well before. They hinted at running Yoshida in the Whitney. They've hinted at this a lot, like as if it's been on their mind. The horses worked on the dirt, in the last, you see 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dirt works. Bill Mott's a Hall of Famer. I think he knows if a horse will act on the dirt or not. They're giving the horse a shot. I was telling someone the other day, I just wish they would ride the horse like they rode the horse in the maiden special weight at Keeneland on April 9th that caused us to even realize that he was an animal. I get that he's had other good races where he's done something different, but man, he was good on the front end, and he ran huge that day. And I wish that we could maybe see a performance like that where he's going to be forward from the rail, and maybe we will. It's not Joel Rosario's typical style, but I think he can run well. I think this is a spread race, though.
It's interesting. It's a 14-horse field. You don't see this too often. A 14-horse field where a time form says it favors horses who are going to be on or near the early lead. And then you throw in the fact that their top 3 rated speeds on Time Form US Pace Projector are the 12, 13, and 14. I wonder if they don't have half a mind to just go ahead and send here, despite it not being the typical Rosario ride. It's an interesting notion, JK. I certainly agree with the concept of a spread race. I'd love to get your pick. I'll throw one out there who I'm not going to let beat me, and that's number 7, Kurlov. I think it's easy to see that last race and question his character when he had the clear lead in the stretch and seemingly threw the race away. But I will say this, the way the track was playing that day, it's not like it was not a fast, what I would call a fast pace, but it was a day when a lot of closing happened. I just thought he was one I might give a shot to if the morning line of 10-1 is anywhere near right. Don't need him at 6-1 or below, but a horse that I would look to be doing stuff with at the longer end of the odds spectrum. A couple others we have to talk about in here, but give me your pick first.
Yeah, so the two things real fast is, one of the things we hear about a horse trying dirt for the first time, one of the things that are the reasons that they didn't like it was they took dirt. Yoshida could eliminate that as a possibility if he goes on with it and is forwardly placed, like you mentioned. We talk about the jockey, musical chairs. This is a very interesting one, right? And to me, it's a nobody knows nothing situation. So Jose won the Belmont on Tapwrit. Then he's off, Johnny's on, Johnny stays. Okay, then you go to Kurlov where Irad was on. Now he's off, Jose's here instead of on Tapwrit. Then you go to Discreet Lover, Manny's there and stays there. Manny's off of Yoshida. that was the first time he had ridden him, or second time he'd ridden him, so that's not that big of a deal. And then Irad shows up on Sunny Ridge and sticks with that mount. It's very confusing. I guess if I had to pick one horse, I would pick Sunny Ridge with Irad. Does have some tactical speed, does have the Jason Service effect. I'll be rooting like heck for our boys at 10 Strike Racing for Zanotti, who time form likes a little bit. And he didn't run bad last time, so he could provide a great moment for those guys. And if he does, then Pete and I will clearly take the credit for getting another Grade 1 win for 10 Strike. It started with us. It started with us in Longer Valley. So if we can pull off the Grade 1, I'll be smiling from my couch.
I won't be leaving Zanotti out. I'll go with Kurlev as my suggestion. I concur with the spread race, and I think you mentioned a bunch of the ones who would be on that spread. Before we leave the discussion of the race, what about Gunnevera? Certainly looked the part last time. Love Saratoga. I'm not getting beat by him either. The fear and the reason for not making him a selection is I'm not sure if I want the favorite in a race that I perceive as being this open and has so many different ways to go. But what's your thought quickly on Gunnevera before we move to the nightcap?
Well, it's not the toughest Grade 1, but he always takes back, makes one run. I just wish he was going to have a little bit more pace. What I'd love for Gunnevera is for him to take back, make one run, and run fifth, beating 2 lengths, and then we can bet him back in the Breeders' Cup.
All right. I like that thought, and I do agree. It's hard to latch on to closers at short prices in spread races that don't have pace. I still think, depending on what my ticket construction is, I'd like to have some Gunnevera in there. Let's move on to the Glens Falls. Horse I'm married to in here. We talked about it earlier in the meet. On the Moon again, off that trip in the optional claimer early in the meet. Reminds me of C. Khaleesi all over again. Obviously, it's a tough field. There's others in here. I'm going to be having one-way exacta savers with a couple of other horses over On the Moon again. But she's the key for me, and I'll have plenty of On the Moon again in picks. Just a horrible trip last time. Very interesting to see Chad, who seemed displeased, shall we say, with the ride last time, going back to Javier. I think he's going to know. I think he knows more about her now. I think it could be redemption for On the Moon again in this year's Glens Falls. Your thoughts, my friend?
Let's see here. I was going to try to find a sound effect for a head-to-head alert, but I couldn't get it out fast enough. Santa Monica versus On the Moon again. Do you take my challenge?
No, I don't. I don't. I think she's going to be so much shorter, and I'm going to have plenty of straight one-way exacta the other way. So it would be forced.
Santa Monica. I've been wanting to bet her since the Dance Smartly. She missed the last race with the weather. I'm back on Santa Monica again. They worked together last time, On the Moon again and Santa Monica. So
have we seen the workout report for that?
I have heard. I didn't see the workout report, so I'll save it for the workout report. I don't want to bury the lead. I don't know what the fellas at DRF said. But
I think we know based on which one you picked what information you heard.
Actually, you might be wrong about that. We'll talk about it on Tuesday.
I feel like you're holding out on the listeners. I don't like this. How are you playing?
No, I think it was the other way around. I think you worked better. But that was it. Like, it was 5/8. They're going on what, a mile and a half, mile and 3/8. I just think it's a different. We talk about the sprinter can outwork a router, but the sprinter's never going to beat the router in a long race.
Are you going to use both and are they the only two you're going to use in picks?
Those are the two that I would need. Yep.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Yeah. I'm sorry about rejecting your head-to-head, but it's not as bad as when you rejected my head-to-head about the Justify thing. So we'll call it even. We are just about out of time. We ran long. I did want to give our producer today, with Craig Gorbanoff up in the Great White North, we had our man A.J. Wash, who I mistakenly called A.J. Washington on the Steve Bick Show this week, and also mistakenly gave credit to producer Craig for fixing, as well as it could be fixed, the audio of last week's podcast. That credit belonged to producer A.J. He's awesome and a fine musician in his own right. So anyway, wanted to give credit to him. Wanted to give credit to my new cinematographer, Chris Pipito Pipes, for help with the video this week that went up on Out of the Gate. But he fancies himself a little bit of a Scorsese. I was telling him, it's got to be horizontal. It's got to be horizontal. He's like, no, man, this is going to be better. Trust me. I got in trouble with producer Craig for that one, but you can see the budding Scorsese's handiwork if you watch this week's episode of Out of the Gate. Closing thought from you, JK, before we throw it?
Enjoy closing weekend at both venues, wherever you find yourself, and good luck.
There you go. Thank you so much, JK. Thank you also to Willie Nile for providing our theme song. More of his music at willienile.com. Travis Stone for the voiceover up top. Producers Craig and AJ for the fine work they do. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening. Hey, send us in some more questions and comments. I want to do it a different way because sometimes they get lost. Let's start doing this with a hashtag. Just hashtag DRF Pod, questions, comments, criticisms. Send them along. Hashtag DRF Pod. We'll get to some of them next time and throughout the fall on the big run up to the Breeders' Cup. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. We'll be back on Tuesday. May you win all your photos.